And we are pleased now to be joined by our good friend Chris Kirkey, who is the director of the Center for the Study of Canada and the Institute on Quebec Studies at SUNY Plattsburgh. Also here are Chris's co-authors and co-editors of their new book on Quebec-U.S. relations. Professor Stephane Paquin is with the National School of Public Administration in Montreal, and political science professor Frederick Gagnon is the director of the Center for United States Studies at the University of Quebec in Montreal. Gentlemen, welcome. It's so nice to have you here.
Thank you, Tom.
It's great to see you. Mr. Trump seems to be taking direct aim at Canada, threatening stiff new tariffs on Canadian imports, expressing unhappiness over the United States trade deficit with Canada, concerns over the number of illegal migrants crossing from Canada into the U.S., as well as fentanyl getting smuggled across the border. The president demanding Canada address border security to get him to reconsider the tariffs. How is all of this being received by Canadians?
I think people are very worried about what's going on right now with all the speeches, Trump speeches, what he says about the 51st state and the tariffs and the threats. But on the other hand, we've seen the movie before because during his first term, he also threatened to impose tariffs on certain exports coming from Canada going to the U.S. And he also did impose some tariffs on aluminum and steel, but this time it's bigger, the percentage is bigger, it might be on all of our exports, so people are very worried right now in Canada and in Quebec, of course.
And these tariffs might complicate these things. It will probably create inflation in the United States. It will create loss of jobs in Quebec and the United States. So this is why it's worrying for us. And one of the reasons it's also very worrying is that Trump links the tariff not with trade issues, but with drug issues or security issues. And it's hard to see the relationship between the two from a Quebec perspective. So yeah, we are worried, and we know that Quebec and the US has a long history. We will get through that, but for the moment, everybody's worried in Canada.
You know, his mantra from his very first time in office as president was that, you know, the United States was continually overpaying for everything in the world for everybody, right? It was an inequitable distribution of spending and resources, and the United States had long been saddled post-45 with a disproportionate share of the burden. That continues, and that's why we're hearing, for example, about the Canadian trade imbalance. So.
Are Canadians angry when he insults your prime minister, when he calls him the governor, when he talks about the 51st state and how better off Canadians would be being part of the United States? What's the reaction from Canadians?
Well, some people are insulted, of course. Justin Trudeau is not super popular right now in Canada, but still, to see the U.S. president call our prime minister a world leader, the equivalent of a U.S. governor, and you know, we respect governors, but it's not the same level. So of course some people are insulted, and unfortunately we saw some manifestations of that when there was the Four Nations hockey tournament. I think you saw the images where the USA team came to Montreal, and during the national anthem we saw things that we don't like to see. You know, people were kind of making noises and shouting and stuff during the national anthem. So, but the thing is, and we'll see what happens, but unfortunately, words like, you know, the 51st states and the governor from Canada could lead to an increase of anti-Americanism, unfortunately, on our side of the border. And we don't want that, because we want this relationship to be and remain very cordial, because it's one of the most important relationships in the world.
The 25% tariffs, how much of an impact will that have economically on Canada?
Yeah. So typically Canada exports is a really open economy, and 75% of what Canada exports is in the United States. So it's going to have a massive impact on Canada's GDP. Most people expect a recession in Canada for a good 2 years, maybe 2 points of GDP down. So this is why Canadians don't want to go that route. We understand that high inflation is a problem in the United States, but we don't see tariff as a solution to any of that. The security at the border and the inflation. We believe that we should even do more trade together and have a more balanced relation between the two countries.
Is all of this testing the decades of strong ties trade relations between Canada and the United States?
What is changing in Canada now is people are talking about retaliating about the tariff. People are talking about doing more trades with Asia or with the rest of Europe because we now believe that we are too dependent on the United States. We trust too much the US government and the United States in general. So over time, that's not good. It might create a rise of anti-Americanism that we talked about.
To borrow on Stephane's points, I really think that what's in the short term going to impact the vibrancy of the Canada-US relationship, apart from what Mr. Trump opts to do or not do, is the relative value of the Canadian dollar vis-a-vis the United States dollar. If it continues to hover below 70 cents, you're going to hear voices that have been propping up over the last few weeks about, oh, I'm canceling my vacation in Florida, or, oh, I possibly couldn't shop in Plattsburgh because, it's just way too expensive now. Whether that's true or not is another story, but the fact is, when the Canadian dollar declines in value, it does have an impact on, the willingness of Canadians and Quebecers to cross the border.
Do you think Donald Trump's view of the world, of NATO, may force Canadian leaders at some point? Could Canada look for new alliances with European nations? And do you think it could get to a point where the United States may not be seen as an ally anymore, but possibly as an adversary?
You couldn't imagine that question even being posed 3 months ago. It's a genuine question in the sense that I think it would take a lot more for, Canadians, for example, or Quebecers to view the United States as adversaries. But at the same time, it's very clear. I'm not quite sure how Canada or Quebec will be responding in the days ahead, apart from looking to have, as you suggest, Tom, some more multilateral engagement with Europe and other places. But it's very clear that the United States is disentangling itself from alliances, from international agreements, from commitments that it's made over the years. And so that leaves actors, states like Canada, subnational governments like Quebec, sort of saying, what's next? If we can't rely on, if there's no predictability or, as Stephane says, trust, where do we go?
You gentlemen have published a new book titled The Quebec-United States Relationship. All three of you are co-authors and editors. Tell us why you thought now was the time to put this book together.
Both Frederick and Stephane came to our Institute on Quebec Studies as Fulbright Distinguished Scholars in Quebec Studies, as research chairs, and spent a semester with us working on research programs. And during that time, we cultivated close relationships, and maybe perhaps because we're all political scientists, I don't know, but we do like international relations. We look at the Quebec-US relationship. We have taught about it and researched it. And it was only natural, I think, when we developed our close relationship over time that we would come together and say, hey, what about this Quebec? Does it deserve a closer examination? And that led us in 2018 and 2019 to say, hey, let's identify a group of scholars in Canada and the United States, a number of whom are obviously Quebec-based, that would contribute to sort of a book, because the truth is that if anybody goes to their local library, their university library, and they're looking for sources in English or in French, most everything is badly dated. I mean, that's not to say it's not good, but it's just had a window of time. So I think we all recognized it was time to do something. Gentlemen.
Yeah, the last book that was published from a Quebec-based scholar and a US-based scholar was in 1999. And this is the time where Bill Clinton was in office. So we needed to update the book. And now we are working on a French translation adaptation of the book that will be released in the next few months.
We came to the center through a Fulbright Canada chair grant. When I was here in 2014, I started to work more regularly on Quebec-US relations, and
Yeah.
this grant enabled me to start a new project, and I became interested in how Americans in states that share a border with Quebec, but also with Canada, but with Quebec mainly, how Americans living here perceive this relationship. What do they think about this relationship? And of course, in Plattsburgh and in the area, many people were telling me good things about this relationship because economically it's been good for the region, et cetera, et cetera. But I started to do this field research in 2014. And if we come back to Trump, we did the same kind of research in 2018, visiting many states along the border in 2022. And people are still saying, you know, it's a very important relationship for us. But we heard in 2022, more doubts also about the benefits of the relationship. So one of the things that the book says is that, of course, Trump has had an effect on this relationship, on the perceptions, American perceptions about the Quebec-US relationship. Not that everything has changed, but you know, he used the presidential microphone to bring to the attention of many Americans some things that maybe we have to work on in the relationship. So we saw the change, and the book talks a little bit about that too.
What is very interesting with this book, it's open access, so it's freely available online. We decided a few months ago that we will put some money on the side to give to the editor so that it's going to be freely available, because typically these types of books are very expensive, more than $100. So we wanted to make sure that everybody in the United States and Canada could have access to the book, you know, for free.
Especially for students at colleges and universities, because as Stephane said, typically if you don't do it open access, the book is $139 or so. Now it's, I mean, even with the price has come down, I think it's around $60 or so. But the truth is, we wanted to make sure that if you're an undergraduate student, or graduate student, you know, you have limited resources. It's easier for you to simply go to the title, click, download, and you have the book and you can read it anytime you like.
And the French version will be coming out this fall.
Yeah.
Yes.
You and the other authors explore the many ways in which Quebec has long engaged with the United States politically, through trade, our shared open border, immigration, cultural ties, and you bring together a lot of scholars that really delve into that. How big of a group did you bring together?
What we arranged and what we ultimately delivered was a author's workshop in Lake Placid in May of 2022. And we all gathered for about 3 days, exchanging presentations were made by individual authors or groups of authors on their papers. There was some immediate feedback provided to each and every author. Then they walked away and we put together as editors, often with other additional input, a sort of a detailed evaluative review. So when you have a book like this comes out, it's not seen as a sort of exercise in diplomacy or a flag-waving exercise, but sort of a very clear, cold, objective, scientific examination of the depths of that relationship. So to the extent that we're able, and our colleagues are able, to chart this in this book, I think it's important. So,
Gentlemen, thank you so much
Thank
for
you,
taking
Tom.
the time to come and join us. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.